Good afternoon. This is Vice Admiral Mike Cowan. I am the Executive Director of AMSUS. AMSUS is the Association of Military Surgeons of the, of the United States. I'm so focused on this student seminar, I almost called us the American Students Association. Welcome to you all. We've had a wonderful response to this webinar. We've had about 350 people sign up. And by the number of people who are listening in now, we've got a very high percentage of those. So welcome aboard. Today, we hope to kick off a series of webinars that will be of benefit to students as they look forward, particularly to their military residencies. Making the transition from school to residency can be kind of a scary thing, particularly with all of the added complications of going into the military. So what we've done today is scheduled a high-level webinar to talk about military residence in general. With us today are the program directors for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, who will introduce themselves in a few moments, give you a short introductory talk with an overview of their particular services. And I would listen to all three services, no matter which service you are, because there are more similarities than differences, and you will hear those commonalities, and they can be important. Then we will open it up for questions. You have the capability to type questions in. Mel Soroy, who's put this together, is going to tell you how to do that in just a few minutes. We are scheduled to go until 1 o'clock. If there are enough questions and enough interest and people hang on the line, we can go longer than that, we think. Mel, would you like to lay some ground rules and let us know what we need to do here?
Absolutely. We received many questions prior to the webinar, and we appreciate you sending those over. We are likely going to cover those after we hear from our three speakers. We do have a presentation that we are working to get up on the screen. Hopefully you will be able to see that momentarily. And that's about all we have. As Vice Admiral Cowan mentioned, we are going to work to go past 1 o'clock. If not, this will cut off after about 1 hour from now. And that's about it. You'll hear from our three speakers for 10 to 12 minutes each, and then we're going to roll from there. You are welcome to type in your questions as you see fit, and we'll do our best to reach out to each and all of you. And there is contact information for our presenters that you can get, and you will receive this recording if you registered. It will also be available on our website in the students section, and you'll get that information after the webinar as well. So we're about to get started.
As always, before we start, there's a quick word from your sponsor, and that would be AMSUS, the Association of Military Surgeons. If you are not a member of AMSUS already, please come to our website and look at it. We offer student memberships for 1 year that are free. With that membership, you receive the monthly journal, Military Medicine. This is an excellent way to introduce yourself into the kind of things that constitute military medicine and you will be responsible for. After the first year, there's a greatly reduced charge for membership. Our membership fees aren't going to cut into your Starbucks money. But it does give you an opportunity to network with others. It does give you an opportunity to learn about military medicine in a very timely and useful way. With that, let's launch right into our program, and let me first introduce our first panelist, Michael Nelson, Colonel Michael Nelson, who is the Director of the Medical Education Directorate in the Office of the Surgeon General of the United States Army. Michael?
Thank you, Vice Admiral Cowan and Mel and the organizers for this opportunity to represent Army HPSP and our GME programs. It's a distinct pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'd also like to start out by thanking my own staff, in particular Colonel Christine Lettieri and Mr. Art Covey, for their expert leadership at the HPSP program, and Ms. Linda Deal, who serves as our program manager for the Army GME program. AMSUS is indeed the perfect forum for this information in my view. Their continued support of and contributions to military medicine is so greatly appreciated. They've been there through thick and thin, and we're very appreciative to be a part of this offering to students throughout the nation. I'd like to first thank you all, those who signed in today, for taking time out of your day to speak with us. So the fact that you're a scholarship awardee, your accomplishment cannot be understated. With respect to the Army side, competition for scholarships is at one of the programs to organize with respect to the quality required to gain a scholarship and the number interested in receiving one. So bravo, well done to each and every one of you. The very best of luck in your current studies, no matter what service you're participating in, and we look forward to seeing you in some of our GME programs in the medical course shortly. I thought I'd begin by giving a quick overview of our HPSP program. The Army HPSP program has scholarships to remind everyone not just for the medical corps, but we also have scholarships for the vet corps, dental corps, and medical service corps for some of our allied health trainees. And we also have nurse corps for practice nursing. A total of 1,450 to 1,800 total in training at any given time. And with respect to the medical corps, somewhere between 260 to 295 awardees each year and graduates each year. We have students in 154 medical schools scattered throughout the nation. And HPSP is indeed our lifeblood. It represents really 80% of the pipeline for active duty staff medical corps officers and those that are entering GME. Hopefully those that are in the Army are recognizing some of the advancements in our program. I'll point out that some of you about to schedule rotations are already on, should have already received your CAT cards or at least authorization to do so. That should facilitate your training once you get on site for one of your ADT rotations. Let me give you a quick overview of our GME program. We have a total of usually around 1,500 plus, I think it's 1,528 this year that are in training. The vast majority are indeed in-house military and VA DoD programs. We have very few that we send out for sponsored training or delay. We have 149 total programs with 70 residencies, 73 fellowships, and 6 transitional year internships scattered throughout 10 different teaching hospitals. And we have Army trainees in over 109 different specialties. We're very proud of how well our trainees execute their training and perform in certification exams upon graduation. We maintain a 93 to 95% first-time board pass rate, exceeding the national average somewhere around 86 to 87%. So as I said, Army HPSP program is indeed vital to the sustainment of our medical corps and our Army medicine. All 3 services do indeed tailor their programs to their specific needs, so there are some differences. We're not in competition at all with each other. In fact, we work very closely. I'm very proud of Mike and Eli, who you'll hear from shortly, for the programs that they are running. So I will give you a couple of things to keep in mind that may be a little bit specific or distinct for the Army HPSP and GME programs. BOLIC, which is our Basic Officer Leaders course, is an absolute requirement to our medical school. The sooner the better. We do have some changes coming in 2017 with addition of a second phase, one that we'd like to have individuals complete before medical school. I've already mentioned that the vast majority of our trainees train in military treatment facilities. The vast majority of our trainees selected for internships are also on continuous contracts and will complete their full residencies before their utilization tour. There are exceptions like aerospace medicine. Everyone in HPSP program should expect to train in a GME program, and if accepted, you are okay to apply to the national match, but if you're accepted to one of the military programs, we're going to require you to withdraw your name. Even though most everyone trains in military programs, I can state that no one is forced into a specific specialty not of their choosing. And in fact, 80 to 85% get a specialty of their choice during the GME match. So I'll end with a few recommendations. Do the best that you can in every rotation, on every exam, and every time you see a patient. Study for and take the STEP exam seriously. Passing does count. Scores do count in the moment and in the future as you start to look at matching into some of our GME programs. And then the ugly reminder that failure is indeed grounds for dismissal from our scholarship program. I would advise you to stay engaged. So read the newsletters, the emails. I know you get a ton, but there's important information in them. Reach out and touch to those prospective programs that you're interested in. There's nothing that beats having close relationships with those program directors and faculty and programs that you're very interested in. And lean on your peers. Army medicine, military medicine, Navy medicine, Air Force medicine is team care. We count on each other. We're brothers and sisters in arms, and the same should apply with respect to your medical training, both in our medical education, GME, but also at the HPSP level. So use the peers, use social media. There's a lot of help out there for you. Do not procrastinate. Very important to make sure that you meet suspenses. And along those same lines, map out those rotations for BOLIC and your active duty rotations in the military treatment facilities as soon as you can. Gain an understanding of the competitiveness of the programs and align your GME aspirations with the reality of your own interests, but also your own qualifications. And then finally, enjoy medical school and the scholarship program. Very much looking forward to seeing you in one of our GME programs in the near future. And I'll turn it back over to you, Vice Admiral Cohen.
Well, thank you very much, Colonel Nelson. That was a great presentation. Colonel Forgione is scheduled to be our next speaker. Are you on, Colonel? From the Air Force? I think Colonel Forgione has been delayed, but that's all right because Captain Elizabeth McGuigan, who's the Chief of Professional Development for the Navy GME, is also here and ready to go. So we'll go ahead and let you go in second place. Captain McGuigan.
Are you able to hear us?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for inviting us to webinar today. I have here with me Lieutenant Karen Maldarelli, which will be the main point of contact for the medical students in our office over the next cycle. And hopefully joining us later will be Lieutenant Commander Aban from HPS. Students need to know is Miss Natalie Parra and Mr. Bill Robinson. We're all going to be available to help them through the next cycle to hit all their marks. I'd like to echo many of the points that Colonel Nelson made and sort of, if it's all right with you guys, sort of jump right into some of these questions, some of which may be good for everyone to hear and some of which will be sort of try to touch on most that we got ahead of time. And hopefully highlight some of the process. So one of the questions was path to residency and how is that influenced if you're interested in something considered competitive. Process for competitive versus non-competitive, it's all relative and depends on what your interests are and are applying for that particular residency. And for us, I don't know what it's like for Army and Air Force, but for us there can be considerable variation from year to year. So what it's going to come down to is establishing and maintaining a good relationship with the program director of the program that you're most interested in to get a good sense of where you stand in that process. And then the other thing is always have a plan B. I'm going to highlight a couple of things that came out of this year's process that are recurrent. And one of the things that kind of goes along with what Colonel Nelson was saying about being realistic about what you're interested in, I do want people to stretch and to go for what they're most interested in, but you also need to have a realistic plan B. So, you know, if there's just for an example, 60 people applying for ortho and there's 12 spots, then that you're 100% going to get ortho, even if you walk on water. That'll be a recurrent theme. But in general, about half of our PGY1s will go straight through into residency, and half will go out as operational, either general medical officer, flight surgery, or UMO. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Here's another question. Does your choice on what to participate in during intern year influence which residencies you can apply to or participate in? Yes, it does. So ACGME is shifting more and more toward categorical residencies. So if you know you want to do, say, ENT, it's going to be important to do a categorical ENT internship. Same thing for ortho or surgery or medicine. If you aren't sure, then I would recommend doing something like transitional, where you have an opportunity to explore options more through internship. Here's a question: what are the common choices that are available between residency and intern year, such as GMO tour, and is there a central location? So there isn't a central location for the information. Your points of contact for general medical officer will be the detailer, and he will reach out and talk to you about what your options are. For flight surgery, it'll be Captain Toon, who is the specialty leader. For undersea medicine, it will be Captain Waters, who's the specialty leader for undersea. And there's an instruction that comes out. There are actually two instructions that you're going to want to read in their entirety when they come out in the May-June time frame. One is the instruction for this year's board, and the next instruction will be for flight surgery and UMO selections for the coming year. So you'll want to familiarize yourself with the procedures for both. And the common choices are general medical officer, flight surgery, and UMO. You don't have to apply to be a general medical officer. You do have to formally apply to be a flight surgeon or a UMO, and you will get selected at the same time. Announcements come out at the same time. Will military residencies do something similar to the single accreditation by allowing for osteopathic specific training through certain endorsements or acknowledgments? So ACGME is currently in the process of combining with AOA into a single accreditation system. I think in September they went out a request for comments on the revisions, and they're going to be reviewing it. The entire process will not be completed. And the military, at least the Navy residencies, are just going to follow along with that process. So again, I'm going to strongly recommend that you talk to your program director when you go in for your interview or your rotation to find out what the status is, particularly for your school. Some schools are dual accredited already and some aren't. So you're going to need to be very forthright and discuss that ahead of time. Next question is, my program has a lot of emphasis on procedures that rural doctors can do in clinic, like colonoscopy, dermatology procedures, and obstetrics. What do the family medicine programs in the Navy teach procedure-wise? So the family medicine programs are full scope, and that includes OBGYN. As far as colonoscopy and dermatology, you're going to have to talk to the individual program directors about whether there may be opportunities, but I don't think that's required. But obstetrics is required. What are military residency schedules like? They're the same as civilian. We have the same accreditation standards. We hold to the 80-hour work week and the DOD hour standards, so you're going to find it very similar. And most of the PGY 1 year in residencies have a fair number of out rotations that you'll do in civilian hospitals anyway. You'll wear a military uniform when you're in the military hospitals. You'll wear civilian clothes when you do your out rotations. Will you describe in detail the process that happens to select students, particularly the most competitive ones? So kind of echoing what Colonel Nelson has already alluded to, I think really what you want to do is take advantage of every possible opportunity and interaction. And this don't limit yourself to just thinking about sort of face-to-face when you're in front of the program director. Think about when you're on your rotation. How are you interacting with your residents? Are you showing up and participating? Are you available? Do you show up on the weekends? There's a term for that called ghosting. And if you ghost, you're not likely to be scored high. I can just tell you that right up front. So the bottom line is what you want to do when you're answering emails, when you're filling out your application, when you're interviewing, when you're scheduling rotations, you want to be too good to ignore. All right? Keep that in mind and think about that as you go through the upcoming year. The selection process will start when we send out the official instructions in June, will be the BUMED note, and then you'll have a layout of where your different opportunities are. The big training hospitals are the National Capital Consortium in DC and San Diego and Portsmouth. And then you can also train in family medicine, Jackson, Fort Belvoir. And when you set up your rotations, you'll be talking to, in all likelihood, the GME coordinator. You want to get your details correct, find out from them what kind of access you need to face. You want to show up the proper uniform. Occasionally we get phone calls about that. And again, you want to immediately start networking and make sure that you are getting your questions answered by current residents, so you're prepared when you go in to talk to and so you sound intelligent when you're asking questions. Here's a question: what kinds of things help a student stand out in their residence application? So to be perfectly frank, your matter. There's really no way around that. But for most of you, those results are already in place, and there's not much you can do to move the needle one way or the other. I can say that professionalism is a huge factor that can significantly affect your presentation, I guess, when you're getting ready for the board. If you appreciate it, all of the admin staff will appreciate it. Having a complete record to review is important when it gets to the board time. So if I'm looking at a record that has only partial information, it's going to be very hard to give you the maximum number of points. Let's see. There's a question here about DO students and COMLEX. I can tell you that it is not a requirement. Both COMLEX and USMLE. This question is actually in a couple of places here on this list. It's not a requirement that you take both, but I will tell you that the majority of students do take both. And hear about whether people are more comfortable assessing the USMLE scores. I would say probably yes, they probably are. Most of the program directors are reassured when you come in with good USMLE scores. How do I go about picking what side I want to rotate at? Well, that depends. It depends on what's available, what you're most interested in, what your location is, what the funding situation is. I would and try to finalize your schedule as early as possible. On that theme, if you get told that that an institution is full and they are not allowing any more rotations or any more interviews, you can contact me directly. Okay? I have on rare occasions run into situations where medical students were not being given opportunities to interview. And it's not common, but when it happens, I want to get on that immediately. You're free to contact me directly if you run into that situation. What recommendation do we need? We ask for 2, but there's no cap. You can send in more than 2 if you want. How many need to be specific to our specialty? At least 1. And how about civilian versus military letters of recommendation? And then the last question for the Navy panelists is, what happens if we don't get assigned the medical specialty that we want? Are we forced to do a different specialty, or do we do a GMO tour, or do we do a civilian residency? So you'll have the opportunity to apply 2 specialties. If you fall out of both of those, then we'll get an opportunity to do a 1-year, in all likelihood, a transitional year. But the goal is going to be to fill our in-service position. So if there is an opening and you haven't found a spot, a home yet, in the first 2 places that you chose, then we'll find a home for you. And if there is a class, so the number of in-service slots we have is 258. If we have a class that's bigger than that, like for instance last year we had a class that was significantly bigger than that, a certain percentage of you will go out for deferment. And those distributions will be worked out at the training plan meeting, which will be, in all likelihood, end of March, beginning of April. And then we will get that information out to you. So if you are interested in doing a deferment, you'll have the opportunity to discuss that with the specialty leader. And the way this would work is, like, let's say, I'll give you an example. There are some specialties where we almost always have more of a need than we have applicants. So that would be general surgery, family medicine, and psychiatry for just 3. So in that case, let's say you're interested in doing general surgery and you're interested in potentially going out for full deferment or full-time in-service, then what you'll want to do is reach out to Captain Sheps, who is the specialty leader, and tell him that you're interested in deferment, or NADS, that's another term that you can use, and then he will interview you for deferment. And then let's say you also wanted to be considered for in-service, and you're a West Coast kind of person, so you're looking at San Diego, then you'll want to interview as well at San Diego to be considered for their program. So hopefully we will try to do as much as we can to help you through each of these steps and give you reminders and help you if you run into any speed bumps along the way. You should have, all the 3rd-year students should have already gotten their first email from Lieutenant Maldarelli back in December, and she will continue sending you emails and reminders and answering questions course of this whole process.
Captain Beguiga?
Yes.
We just now got Colonel Forgione. We're going to try to patch him through. If you come to a place where we can switch over to him, and then we'll go back to the questions afterwards. That work?
All right, that's fine.
Thanks. 3rd Colonel Forgione, Air Force. We had some technical difficulties. So we have patched him through old school. He will be speaking through the speakerphone on my desk from San Antonio. He does have some slides to show up. We're going to try to coordinate all this, so bear with us. And if people have trouble hearing, or if there's any technical problems, type them in for us so that we can know and adjust fire. Okay? Colonel Forgione, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see my slides. I'm going to go to slide 2. I like doing things old school, so this is fun for me. So what I'm going to give you a little bit, since most of the HP-SP students don't have a huge Air Force background, I'm going to touch on our service a little bit and why you're such an important part of our pipeline. I'm going to talk briefly about our GME programs as a large overview. You already heard comments from Colonel Nelson. Different than the other services. I do have some preliminary selection board results from this year with some info that will help you as you're kind of planning your career track. And then we'll touch on the way forward. So slide 3. So this is our total active duty Air Force for 2015 as of November. We have a total line as well as medical of 60,000 officers. The medical service, including nurses, veterinarians, bioservice corps, docs, make up 10,000 of those 60,000 officers. And in the medical corps, so physicians, we have about 3,300 or so on active duty as of November. And you can see the rank breakout on this as well for our medical corps. Next slide. So when we start talking about the HPSP and USHIS students, we add in, you guys are medical service corps officers at this point. And so, you know, you can see that we have about 1,300 total of all of you guys in various schools, including USHIS. And then we have our current Air Force GME, which are encompassed in these officers that are listed in the left in the rank structure. We have 815 that we train on active duty military in our training programs as of this year. 100 of them are doing civilian sponsor where they're in active duty status, but in the civilian training program. We have close to 300 deferred doing civilian residency and fellowship training. And then we have 34 in the financial assistance. So when you take a look at our service on the next slide as a summary, at any one time, our pipeline is 2,500 of our 5,000 total officers that are in medical school or further training or on active duty service. About half are in training status and about half are staff positions in the Air Force. So I think that's an important understanding of where you are in the pipeline for what you will be moving forward in your career. Next slide. So our programs really try to develop knowledge, skills, and attitudes to make you highly qualified medical personnel to support our main mission, which is maximum wartime readiness and combat capability. And the Army has very similar statements as well, because I kind of took some of this from the Army. Our training programs really help to maintain the health of our DoD personnel. They provide health care to our deployed military personnel. They provide a very large peacetime system of health care for all the beneficiaries, of which you will be beneficiaries of that health care system you'll be working in also. So very important part of our overall laydown. So now I'm going to move on the next slide, to our GME programs. So we really have excellent programs in the Air Force. 100% of our programs have full accreditation through the ACGME, which is our accrediting body. And so essentially, if you look at all the programs out there, about 98% of training programs in the U.S. are accredited. All of ours are accredited in the Air Force. And the majority of our programs are this new term, which they call substantial compliance, which means our programs and the folks running them are doing a really good job, training physicians. When you look at our board certification stats, we have 24 of the 31 specialties that we train have 100% first-time board pass rate, which is phenomenal. And all 31 of the specialties that we train, we have 85 training programs. All 31 of these specialties exceed the national average for first-time board takers. Similar to the Army and the Navy can boast these statistics as well. And our program leaders and faculty are involved in national specialty societies, the ABIM, and the ACGME in various leadership roles as well. Next slide. So the process that the Air Force uses for GME selection is really twofold. We have a health profession education requirement board, which I'll refer to as the HPERB, which is where we look every year at the total force, all those docs and faces that I talked about in the previous slide, and whether they're staying in, getting out, going to training, and so forth. our manning requirements and what we need to make sure we have adequate medical forces down the pike. So that's all goes into the Health Professions Requirements Board. And from that board, we determine each year what our training requirements are going to be. And then those training requirements are published, and then you guys apply for the various training requirements that we get out of this requirements board. And that's the process you'll go through as the GMESB, or the Joint Service Graduate Medical Education Selection Board. Lots of alphabet soup. You'll get comfortable with the mnemonics. It only took me 6 months to be able to say that without slurring it. So the bottom line is we use these processes to meet the current and future requirements of the Air Force Medical Service, and it provides professional development opportunities for our applicants, as well as, you know, maintaining that high academic quality we have in our Air Force GME programs. Slide. So I'm on slide 10. So this is our GME cycle in a pictorial view. So it starts and ends with our selection board each year, and then we're actually getting ready to open up our HPERB process. This is a multi-corps, so all the bioservice corps, the nurses, the vets, all the other disciplines that we have, officers in the medical service, do the same HPERB process to determine what training slots we need to maintain our force and to provide the mission. And then we go through this process and ultimately come up with, usually by June, all of the training opportunities are going to be available for the next year's selection board, which is the one, if you're a fourth-year med student, this year you've already applied to our board, but if you're a third-year medical student, you'll be applying for what we're doing in our HPERB this upcoming cycle. Next slide, slide 11. So this is the applications to that selection board over the years. And you can see this previous year, in the column on the left, we have 620 folks that have applied for additional training in the Air Force. And so these numbers keep going up, and I suspect it will probably be around the same number next year as well. And you can see the difference between the active duty numbers, the medical students, and then folks that are in deferred training that are applying to do additional fellowship training or additional training as well. Next slide. So this is what our preliminary results from this year's Joint Selection Board that we just had. Essentially, folks that had a first choice, especially 390 of our folks matched into their first choice specialty of the 623. And then when you look at, we offered a second choice this year, which actually rolled fairly well, and 25 of those folks matched into their second choice. So as you keep going down this list, folks that did not match into the second choice and had a second choice, only 9 people did not match into that, and ultimately will get placed in the PGY1 selection panel. And then of the folks who did not have a second choice, there were 61 that did not match into their primary choice that will go into the PGY1 selection panel as well. So overall, we had 490 folks that were selected for training in the Air Force, and 95 were non-selected. And of those 95, they were all active duty, because our folks out of medical school that don't match will get selected to go into the PGY1 panel to get a PGY1 year of training. We also occasionally, based on timing of the civilian matches, we'll send folks out a year so they can go through the civilian match in the upcoming year and match into a discipline that we don't train on active duty in the Air Force. So we have 30 folks that are doing 2017 pre-selects as well. Slide 13. Slide. So this is for the medical students in particular. This is me doing a lot of math, and I'm not a real good math guy, so we have to hand jam this. But this gives you, as a medical student, into the positions that we offered for medical students, the number of applicants in that panel, the number selected, so you can see the percentages. You can see how many we selected on active duty versus in deferred status. And then what the average USMLE or COMLEX scores were for both Step 1 and Step 2. for this. So this is what all the Air Force HPSP students have been asking for several years. And since I'm new to the job, I agreed to do that. So we're going to provide this information on our website moving forward, that each board you will have this opportunity to see, what those average requirements were to get selected into those positions. Obviously, some of these positions are very, very competitive. And so the bottom line and the message you already heard is medical school counts, and you really need, medical school will predict, how well you do in our selection boards. And so you can't punt medical school. You got to be the best you can, because that's going to speak to a large portion of what helps you get selected for your residency choices down the road in our selection board. Next slide, slide 14. So how to be successful at this selection board? Really, timely communication with my office. Keep us informed of your phone numbers, email, and address changes. I know that's somewhat challenging. We're trying in the Air Force to do a better outreach. We have telecons through our MedCorps that are going to be year-specific in medical school. We have the AMSUS telecons that we're going to be involved with. And then my office is always available to take your phone calls. You all have assigned a sugar daddy in my office that can help you through the various processes, as you're getting ready to apply for the board, and provide you information as well. The other thing that's very important I have at the end of this talk is our websites. These websites provide information and deadlines. Post, get to our website, put it in your favorites, refer to our website several times a year, keep updated on what's coming down the pike in terms of where what you're going to need to do at each level of medical school to be successful for your upcoming selection board. I already mentioned this. Medical school performance predicts future success. So really perform your best on the steps and the rotations. Get involved, have a voice, ask questions, be inquisitive, work hard, and show the folks that you're auditioning for that you want to be one of those kind of docs. And that's the best advice I can give you. Your dean's letters, even if your med school doesn't rank, put you in quartiles or tertiles or quintiles, depending on the different schools. And so we can see when we look at your applications how you're performing in med school, even if your school doesn't rank. So you want to do the best you can at all times when you're in medical school. The other big thing that we're pushing this year is to talk to the Air Force consultant, and the Navy calls them specialty leaders, for that specialty of your interest. So I was an ID consultant for 6 years. If you're interested in infectious diseases, you call me up and we can talk about the Air Force career field in infectious diseases and what it takes to get there and what you're going to need to do to be successful. And I've engaged all of our specialty consultants in the Air Force to be available for the medical students as they're engaging on choosing a career path. And I think this is very, very important because you're not in our system right now as you're in these civilian medical schools. So that mentorship for Air Force specific stuff is somewhat tough. So I think this is a very important piece. And again, show the programs your best work ethic on your clerkship rotations. My other suggestion is also interview by phone at all of the programs, even if you're not going to be able to do your rotations at it. And that's important because all of our programs are in different geographic locations and are laid down a little differently, even though we all train medicine or surgery. They're vastly different in their approach, and some folks are going to do better in one of our programs versus another program. So really hit those program directors up for how their program's organized and how they're run. And then the other big thing is consider a second choice specialty. I think that's underlooked. There's a lot of ways to get to become a specialist in a discipline, and you may be able to do it through surgery, through medicine, through OB, through different ways, but you may end up on the same career path down the road. So there isn't one way to always become the specialist that you think you want to be. So think about a second choice specialty as well when you go through this. Next slide. So these are our websites. The military website you need a CAT card for, so we have it mirrored on the public side as well. And so we keep these up to date, and I will be posting some more results from our selection board on these websites probably within the next few weeks when I can get some time to do more math. Other than that, call our numbers in my office, and, we have folks that are available to help you as well, and should be very customer service available to answer your questions. Next slide. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Colonel Forgione. That's three great presentations. I graduated from medical school in 1969. I still found these interesting, and I'm not doing a residency anytime soon. Here's what we'll do now. Colonel Nelson and Colonel Forgione and Captain McGuigan all have the pre-loaded questions. Colonel Nelson and Captain McGuigan have access to the questions you're asking live, and so we'll just do kind of a round table. Let's let Colonel Nelson go first and answer a question or two, but please be brief so that we'll let Captain McGuigan go second and Colonel Forgione third, and then we'll go round table selecting your questions either from those that came in early or came in recently.
Great, sure, I'll answer a couple. These are fantastic questions you all have sent in ahead of time. The first one I'm looking at is how do I position myself to best compete and get selected for my residency of choice? We've heard a lot about that from Colonel Forgione and Captain McGuigan. I'll highlight our competitive specialties as general surgery, urology, emergency medicine, orthopedics, dermatology. Sometimes is, sometimes isn't. We're actually not one of our most competitive ones this year. We do publish and have available the applicant to seat ratios for each of these programs, and you can contact our program managers, Colonel Lettieri, or that office to get that information, and we'll be happy to share that with you. But as we talked about before, it's really making those relationships with the program directors and performing well during the rotation. Make sure you don't lock yourself into that resident they pair you with and just the PD. Sample, interface, get to know the other members of that entire team. A lot of the decisions for who gets into programs really comes down to team decisions and questions about, hey, do you remember when Johnny was here? How did they do? And if only 3 people can speak to that individual, it's going to cut down on your chances. Let me move to another one, and then I'll turn it over for the other panelists. What if I do not get into the specialty of my choice? This was also touched on previously. With respect to the Army, this highlights the importance of indicating whether you will be considered for another specialty or the Plan B has been alluded to. You'll get that question during the application process. Take careful time in how you specifically answer that question. If you are interested in being considered, particularly if you're applying to a high demand specialty, it's probably a good idea to open yourself up to that Plan B by indicating yes, you'll be considered from another specialty. So if you do not mention the specialty of your choice, you will be considered for a second specialty as you indicate. And we also do hold a rebuttal board after all the dust is settled following the board to look at our high need specialties such as internal medicine, pediatrics, pathology, and neurology to see if there are students who didn't match in their specialty of choice, if they might be interested and might be qualified for those programs. Otherwise, you will indeed end up in a transitional year program and have the opportunity to apply again next year. And I'll turn it over.
I have another question that came through from University of Texas, Galveston. So he's asking about deferment and said he couldn't really hear the first time through. So let me go over that again. If you are interested in doing a deferment, you will need to talk to the specialty leader, and that is not the same as the program director. So understand that, and we will contact, but the specialty leader is in charge of the entire community. So the specialty leader for surgery coordinates all the efforts of the program directors at National Capital Consortium, Portsmouth, and San Diego, but also interviews all the individuals who are applying for deferments or fellowships. So it's very important for you to make that connection early on. In all likelihood, you're not going to have to do that face-to-face, but you will need to talk to them over the phone. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I want to address is the importance of interviews. So in the past, I would say most of the interviews that I saw were almost exclusively written by the program director, and in some cases that's still the way they do it. But more and more, I'm also seeing consensus interviews or multiple interviews from other staff, other faculty, assistant program directors. And so this is why I know you've heard it from all of us now. It's very important that you get out there and make sure that you are noticed and remembered. Remember, there's going to be a lot of you guys running through over the course of the summer, and come the end of September, what you want to do is make the most of the time that you have. Make sure that whoever you're talking to, whether it's the program director or the associate or one of the faculty members, that you're very upfront. So most of you will be superstars, I'm sure, but occasionally there will be somebody with a special situation of some kind. I would strongly recommend that you be upfront and 100% honest about whatever the situation is. I have seen time and time again program directors who will go to extraordinary lengths to help someone out if they feel that they're making an effort or that they tried to correct whatever the situation was, and most of all that they've been honest. And I have also seen the opposite, where if they feel that you're not being straightforward or that you're withholding information or they find out something after the fact, then that is not going to help your case. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to be like not warm and fuzzy, but it is true that if you have a situation, you must be very honest and very forthright about whatever it is. And then if it's a developing situation, you need to continue communicating with your program director while whatever it is being resolved, adjudicated, whatever. All right, I'll let Colonel Forgione take the next couple questions.
All right, hopefully everyone can hear me. So I looking at the bottom of this list, there's several questions about our HPERB, so hopefully I covered that. One of the softball questions is someone has an interest in cardiology, but it wasn't on the HPERB as a residency. So you have to realize that some of our training programs are fellowship programs, so you do it after a primary residency. And so what we did this year for our HPERB was separated into the things that medical students apply for, and then the things that if you're active duty and you already are residency trained, what you're eligible to apply for. So they're sort of two different things. So that should make it a little bit easier for you guys when you're starting to look at your career aspirations. And when you're looking at medical and surgery subspecialties, you need to do that primary residency first before you end up in those disciplines. The other question I saw on here was civilian spots. So as you noticed in my numbers, the Air Force does not have the capacity to train everything we would love to train on active duty status. So we train more in the deferred status than the other services do. And that's been, through my 20 years in the military, it's been consistent. We've been about the same over that 20 years. So that the nuances of that make it a little challenging in that, the Air Force may look at through our HPERB board and say we need to train 30 ER docs to meet, 4 years from now when that training is done to meet the fielded requirements of all the places we need to put ER docs. And so what happens is we'll select 30 training slots for that year. And so on active duty, we can only train 16, which means 14 will be selected to do deferred training. But it's still that competitive process to get those spots. So you still need to match in the top 30 for that discipline in order to get either an active duty or a civilian deferred spot in that discipline. And this year we had, I think, 67 applicants for 32 positions in emergency medicine. So, and every year those numbers are going to change a little bit, but we are always going to offer training positions in all of our primary residencies because you do have to maintain that residency program in the way our service turns over. In a sense, we always need at least that minimum output that we get out of our programs to meet our manning needs in our out years. Over.
This is Admiral Cowan again. We have been, again, this is our beta test. We have been looking into what we can do. We thought we would be able to go over the hour, but apparently not. There's a timer here that will shut us off in just a few moments. So I think this is a good point to go ahead and wrap it up. If attendees have any comments or suggestions about future events, the panelists I know will be getting back together and figure out how we can best serve the students and with future webinars, and we'll be back to you. In the meantime, I highly encourage all of you to go to our website, look at AMSUS, think about joining us. It's very much to your advantage. And finally, we will be sending out a survey. It'll be very helpful if you fill that out so we can learn from your points of view through your eyes how this went. I want to thank our panelists. Like I said before, I found this absolutely fascinating, and I'm sorry we didn't schedule more time. In retrospect, I would have, but I know everyone's busy and getting back to work, and we will be getting back together in various formats in the future. So Colonel Nelson, Colonel Forgione, Captain McGuigan, thank you so much. Mel, thank you for putting this together, and have a happy AMSUS Day, everybody.